Hello, my lovely friends. Here we are again. 2 nights on the trot. This is a crafty nihilist record, I think, for live streaming. But Ben, bless him, did most of the work yesterday. So I was basically on my holidays. So I've had this talk on the go for a couple of weeks. Sorry, I hadn't been around for a couple of weeks, but yeah, one thing or another, busy with other stuff. So wanted to make sure I got this one in while I could, because obviously it's completely seasonal. First of all, just want to say hi to everyone that's joined and all my friends in the chat: Green Tea, Whisperoon, Johnny Fettler, Margaret I saw was in there as well. And yeah, anyone I've missed, I'm sorry, but thank you for joining. So just wanted to look at all these different aspects of Christmas and what came before Christmas, what led into Christmas, all the different aspects of it. I find it really fascinating. I mean, I remember like a few years ago, I think I mentioned it maybe way back on a previous live stream, Andy Thomas's book on Christmas, From Solstice to Santa, a celebratory history. We got this at a symposium years ago. Andy Thomas was saying how much he loves Christmas, and this is a really good little compendium going back through all the different eras and different layers of Christmas, which is somewhat of what I'm going to do now, but going to bring in a lot of bits as well. There was some mentioned by Tanishka, the Moon Woman. You won't be surprised to learn because she keeps popping up. But there was a little bit of mention in her book about the dark origins, or the maybe not the origins is the wrong word, but the dark elements of Christmas, how it's been created or amended over the years. And also there's a very good video on Mind Unveiled's YouTube, which I've mentioned before. There's a very good one on Christmas there, and dark stuff around Christmas. So I want to mix in a lot of all these different aspects, because I think for me that's really what it's about. It's that mixture of dark and light, and perhaps where certain people have tried to push the dark side in many aspects, although it's still obviously shrouded in what's generally supposed to be sugar-coated loveliness. And I want to say as well that I do really like Christmas, as Liz will testify to her annoyance sometimes. But so I do really like it. So I'm certainly not going to diss Christmas and saying don't have a good time, because I will be enjoying it as well. But I've always found it fascinating, the amount of different traditions and how they've all come up over time. So, but yeah, we start off again where I was just yesterday in Avebury, and this was a nice picture. Not one of mine, sadly, but one I got from the internet. But another lovely wintry scene with the snow there as well, just emphasizing it. But the winter solstice is, of course, something that's goes back thousands of years, the celebration of it. And again, I've mentioned it in recent live streams, so not going to necessarily go into massive amount of detail, but it is important, I think, to go over this aspect that I've mentioned before. And it does seem to be cropping up a lot, you know, in talks I've heard and things I've read, the importance of the winter solstice above the summer solstice, where in a lot of people's mind, maybe in the sort of popular zeitgeist, the summer solstice is the one that people seem to have latched onto, I suppose, in terms especially of people just wanting to have a party, and it's like, well, it's summer solstice, it's summer festival, you know, it's around the time when they have Glastonbury Festival. It's obviously you hope the weather's going to be a bit nicer and warmer, and it's the time for celebrating. Yay! But in many ways, when we really need that celebration time at its most is when the time, the earth, nature, everything is at its darkest, and the days are the shortest. It's cold, and especially uh, for those, I was going to say in the past, but it's sadly not in the past, is it? It's right right here and now. People who struggle to keep their homes warm and that sort of thing. So it's a time, and it's a time, sadly, when more people pass away in this time. It's and that may be, although obviously it's there's to do with the harsh weather, but also that maybe is a connection with, again, this idea of it being dark in terms of the veil being at its thinnest, and it's that sort of journey to the underworld. And that's what I think many of these winter solstice ceremonies, celebrations that they had in pagan times were about. It's about visiting the underworld, as so many of the legends and myths that have come about since, going through this underworld, but then coming out, and the earth, of course, then being replenished. But symbolically, the winter solstice, it is the shortest day, so it's at this zenith when things are, I suppose, you're deepest in the underworld, but then you come out the other side, and this the symbolism of that light at the darkest time of the year to reignite life. And I talked before about these cairns and long barrows, the ones, you know, in several places like Newgrange, Myshall, and is it West Kennet Longbarrow? Does that have the alignment with winter solstice? I think I've said, we talked before that it does. But you know, so often the idea of the alignment, so that this winter sun comes into, as we talked before about it being womb-like in these cairns and long barrows, but also representing a sort of death. And of course, people were buried there in many of these chambers. You know, they found remains, but it's penetrated by this light of the sun to symbolize how this, from this death, from this darkest period, that and it will start to get lighter, it will start to get warmer, and nature will start to return, and things will get easier in that respect. Just to stick with Avebury for a little bit, Maria Wheatley's written about, just to go over to the next picture, I talked before, I'm going to talk about Avebury, about the what's known now as the Devil's Chair. And I suppose that naming obviously has become, in the post-Christianized era, where it's been called the Devil's Chair, because it's been put on this old pagan megalithic site that it's, you know, a place of demon worship. Maria was saying that in the time of when the henge was at its strongest and it was a ceremonial place, this was probably where someone of great importance, a shaman or priest or priestess, would sit to have a spectacular view of the rising midwinter sun. And 4,500 years ago, that rising midwinter sun would have been clearly visible through the causeway entrance, as you look down the West Kennet Avenue, and as it rose higher, it would have been framed by the avenue stones, 1A, what's designated now 1A and 1B. I don't think they're there anymore. I think one's under where the road goes through. and it would flooded the entrance with light. And for prehistoric people, the winter solstice was, again, from what people can gather anyway, or some people would say that they've maybe had visions and connections with these times. It was the most important because it was the turning point in the year when the seasonal flow turned from darkness into light. But as I mentioned, with it being called the Devil's Chair, obviously I'm leaping ahead a bit now, but I'm going to sort of go backwards and forwards slightly. But of course, the modern Christian period, the modern Christmas, Christ Mass, it's been linked anyway to Jesus, and I think there might be a bit of debate, but this is Pope Julius, and during the 4th century AD, and I think he was the one that was supposed to have said that the December the 25th would mark the birthday of Jesus. But this was a date that had been already of great importance for a long time. It is linked again to the winter solstice. I think it's good. The actual winter solstice is usually around the 21st, I believe. Occasionally there's a slight deviation either way, because obviously the years aren't exactly 365 days. But yeah, generally at the 21st. But what that was it. That's when it's at its lowest point, if you like, the shortest day. But it's generally like for the 4 days afterwards, it appears, or it would appear, as if the sun is still, extremely low in the sky, like it's almost disappeared. So it's like the 25th is the day when it suddenly becomes a little bit more higher up in the sky. So it is like that, the return of the sun, sun, but as has been symbolized by so many stories before and continuing through into Jesus, it's been connected to legends of, if you like, a rising sun, son, a savior, and this idea of, well, with the idea from the winter solstice of light from the actual sun illuminating and warming up the earth and heralding how things are going to be easier or better or literally brighter within this cycle, the annual cycle of nature and the heavenly bodies. And of course, in so many legends, this became it became linked to the idea of a savior or hero that was going to be bringing light to the world, or somehow offering a better time, a time of victory, strength, prosperity, whatever it may be. But of course, yeah, so that it's then with the so many empires or controlling forces, they will then use this idea of a messiah or a bringer of light, but they will then turn that to their advantage. I did wonder, as I'm going to go into a little bit more as we go on, but Mind Unveiled in their video was talking about the idea that perhaps a lot of these things that I'm going to go into later, where some of the more darker legends around whether it's Santa Claus or Father Christmas or things surrounding that, and I'm going to go into them later, but a lot of those seem to have appeared in different places, or certainly written records of them first started appearing around sort of 15th, 16th century, so that's sort of Middle Ages time. And that made me think, because already talked before in the Avebury talk around, it was around this Middle Ages time when there was this big craze, I suppose you could call it, for pulling down, destroying, or burying so many, sadly, of the stones in Avebury. And I'm sure it would have happened around other megalithic sites as well. And I just wondered, because Mind Unveiled is putting out there the idea that this sort of idea of their great reset, and how these great resets have happened at different times in history, when the people who control things want to do a complete changeover of how the world is run and how society is, and it's like an erasure of the history that's gone before, and things are rewritten. And I just wondered, again, was this craze of pulling down the stones at Avebury and places like that and destroying them, was that again part of this reset? Certainly, obviously, it was pretty much as far as you can be determined. It was around, some sort of Christian fervor, where it was seen that these were places of devil worship and satanic, I suppose, if that term had been used yet. And so around that, it was seen as being something that people needed to do for the good of the world and good of society. So, but as I say, the choosing of the 25th of December as being the birthday of Jesus was certainly an arbitrary one. And of course, there's plenty of people that say there was no historical Jesus at all, but even those that do believe there was a historical Jesus, very few would say that was his actual birthday. I've read things saying, well, first of all, it's probably more likely the 3rd century in terms of our current dating. And there's been much debate since, right from that time, as to when his birth date would have been, but a lot of early Christian writers suggested various dates in March, April, and May, so we're talking more around the springtime. But again, it was definitely chosen for other reasons, to align him in the Roman Empire, as they'd suddenly, after persecuting Christians and Christianity, had suddenly decided that they were going to adopt it, so as their sort of state religion. So that you got to think that there was reasons for that, and I know a lot of people gone into it about, and it was chosen for different reasons. But in terms of wanting to align the subjects of the Roman Empire, so they would agree to this conversion, and they would accept the new deity, if you like, or this new savior figure, the new religion. Monotheism, yes, as it says. So to make this more palatable, maybe they aligned it with what was already the birth dates that were celebrated by major earlier Roman deities. So this is Sol Invictus, which means literally invincible sun, known as Helios in Greek. And already that made me think, because I think Prince Harry didn't he supposedly star or was a figurehead for these Invictus Games, so called, which was things are like sort of like a mini Olympic Games for soldiers or veterans, I seem to remember. And that makes me, obviously we've got Sol Invictus, invincible sun, so the connections with the sun, so you could take that back to the winter solstice celebrations, because it's about the sun, and as I say, this light coming in to impregnate life at the darkest time. But the idea of soldiers as well, the other major deity that was also said to have been born on 25th December was Mithras. Seen here, I think he's part of that legend is him killing a bull, which is something which comes up in lots of different legends. Now, and also just as an aside, the Isis and Osiris legends in Egypt with Horus, and Horus was also connected to the winter solstice. And I've mentioned Horus before, and Osiris, Isis, and again you've got these ideas of decapitation and the persecuted child, although Horus would obviously become the king, god, savior, if you like. But this idea of persecuted children is something that's going to keep coming up. But Mithras, I mentioned Prince Harry's Invictus Games, which is for soldiers. Mithras was a hugely popular cult. It began in Iran, but then it became huge around the Roman Empire. But it was particularly big with soldiers. But there were temples all over Europe, and going to be mentioning the Knights Templar again, who keep poking up in different talks, and they apparently took over a lot of Mithras temples in Europe. So there's definitely connections there, and they seem to have followed on from that. Hi, Linda. Seem to have followed on from that, and of course the Knights Templars were seen as these holy soldiers for God, for Christ. So that would seem to make sense. It's probably like just a continuation of this cult in a different form or under a different name. Also, an interesting thing I think about Mithras was a lot of their sort of temples and where the people met to worship him were underground, and that makes me think now of all these underground military bases. And just and I talked before as well about Turkey with all these underground cities and all that sort of thing. But I might have mentioned, but I finally, after years of wanting to go, did go to this Mithraeum, I think they call it, which is the ruins of a Mithras temple in London, and it was found when they were excavating some buildings right near the banks of the Thames. But they had to move it because whatever was being built there. But it's always fascinated me that the Bloomberg, this massive giant American corporation run, of course, by, was it Mike Bloomberg, who used to be the mayor of New York, and very much a well, I'll say the word Illuminati just to trigger people. But just basically one of these catch-all terms for one of the rich and powerful that seem to like to control us and everything else. But I just found it so striking that they chose to basically pay for these ruins to be rehoused in their London headquarters, which apparently was going to be the European Union headquarters until Brexit. But they, it's sort of, I mean, okay, there's one thing, a corporation, and oh yeah, we'll give some money to charities or to restore old buildings and that. But for them to actually house this ancient temple to this cult that was very important, as I say, particularly for soldiers in the Roman Empire, and they chose to house it right basically in the basement of their London headquarters. And it's just basically they're continuing this cult, and it's quite weird. I was thinking of putting it on here, but I probably would have got this final strike that will kick us off. But I had it sort of recording my on my phone, but they're like very strict about, oh, you know, you can't record while you're there, and you go in there and it's only very brief. That you're there for a few minutes, if you like, but they play something which is supposedly, I guess, them having a ceremony. So it's all this like in, I don't know if it was Latin, I suppose. And Connor was with me, and he was saying it's just like we've been subjected to some sort of satanic sort of spell being cast over us or something. But they just sort of had the lights down and just maybe some sort of sound effects, and this. No, well, like I say, you're not supposed to do it. So
we'll just do it.
Yeah, but we might get kicked off. That's the thing.
We'll do it.
Well, I don't know, but maybe we'll do it on Rumble, because yeah, all right, I'll find it and we'll try and get it up there somehow, and get a link to it so people can have a little look at it. Mark's picture looks like an upside down pudding.
That's what I'm doing, is talking about food. Johnny's only had mince pie since Friday.
I'm glad to see you all getting in the right spirit of it. That's all right. Johnny's gonna have a lettuce for pudding. Well, oh, well, good on you, green tea. Quite right too. I'm feeling a bit deprived now. We had a good celebration yesterday, so we had some lovely food and drink. Hi, Maury. Yeah, just popped in. So, yeah, keep celebrating, and we'll keep on with that. So yeah, no, I just wanted to aside for that, because it's always like struck me that, you know, and we first heard about that. Is that Tracy Twyman? Well, she died. We can't, yeah. But she wrote a book which is apparently very graphic about things happening with children. But it was, and I think she was weaving. I don't know if it was actually, you know, the direct rich person that I'm talking about here, but she weaved in maybe real life characters. And yeah, I don't know what there was the official cause of death, but sadly, but yeah, she had an interview on Freeman Fly, and she mentioned it there, that she took a trip to research a book in London, and then she just saw a sign for this Mithras temple, and I don't think she knew anything about it, and then found out it was in this headquarters of Bloomberg, and it was just like, wow, you couldn't believe it, really. But yeah, Mithras, very important figure in the Roman Empire, and as I say, it's supposed to have been alleged to have been born on 25th December. He's supposed to have emerged from a rock, something like that, in the Genesis. Apparently, some of the early Gnostic, early Christian texts talked of Jesus being born in a cave rather than. I think I read, actually, although I'm not going to go massively into the nativity story, etc., but that I don't think it's actually mentioned in the Bible that he was born in a stable, but it just means this maybe can. but yeah, but yeah, again, an aside, him being born from a rock, but I mentioned before about these idea of like meteorite stones and how they've been revered and linked to gods and goddesses and worshipped over the years. I don't know the Mithras thing. I don't think there's any. Well, I haven't heard a reference to this rock being from space in like a meteorite form. But again, just that just sort of struck me there. But yeah, the fact that it's the 25th of December obviously is no coincidence. And again, of course, like I say, originally that date is of great importance because of its link to the winter solstice. So it goes back to those megalithic sites of thousands of years ago. And like I said before, the megalithic sites, the rituals around it, and then myths and legends. It's a continuum, but it's where these things become corrupted, perverted, used as a means of control. So yeah, I think I already mentioned that Mithras was an Iranian cult to begin with, but it got taken up by ancient Greece and Rome. And I think as well, Mithras was said to be born of a virgin. It's a bull sacrificing cult. I did read, where it might be the idea of sort of a taming nature. So these ideas of where so much of the empire, as a sort of all-encompassing word, wanted to reinforce their power by suppressing nature worship, the sort of mother goddess, and these ideas. So perhaps the bull sacrificing cult was part of that. But I've read a number of things saying, which I like to believe, that the original nature religions were about life and not death, even though there may have been elements of sacrifice within it, and certainly they had a reverence for the dead. So certainly they looked at the dark times, if you like, the shadow. But like the winter solstice, in the darkest times, it was celebrating that this was then, you have to have the shortest day, but then it's going to start getting longer, and you have to go through that cycle to get to the other side. An interesting aside, apparently Aleister Crowley said that Baphomet is Mithras. So there may have been this morphing again of different legendary religious cult figures. And as I'm going to talk a bit more about Knight Templar as we go along, but Mind Unveiled was mentioning, as of course other people will be aware, where the Knights Templar were said to revere and worship Baphomet. So although they're supposed to be a Christian military order, and of course these things have moved on to Freemasonry, there's the idea that they're actually worshipping Baphomet. So again, this all could be linked back to these ancient cults of the Roman Empire. Gary, fabulous to see you, my friend. Excellent. What a wonderful Christmas party we're having, talking about death cults. No wonder everyone's talking about chocolate and Christmas pudding and Abby Shipmas. Abby Shipmas, wasn't she? Yeah. Get on with it. Yeah. Bloody. Yeah. Oh, well, they're the Knights Templars. There we go. Sorry, I should have already moved that picture on there. But there we go. But even then, you got this. I don't know, just with the cloak, and he's got a red cap on. These are things we might need to bear in mind as we start moving into sort of Santa Claus territory. But still sticking on the ancient gods. Look at this chap. Oh, so Saturn. Again, the Arum is, yeah. Oh, it's nasty, isn't it? Oh, I don't know whose painting that is. It's yours. So Saturn, and we've got another. I think this one's Goya. This is quite a famous one, isn't it? Kronos, which is I think it's a Greek name for Saturn, the god. Now, he was supposed to have secured his place as the king of gods by killing his own father, and then he sired the gods Demeter, Hestia, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, but he devoured his children because there was a prophecy that they were going to do to him what he'd done to his father, and that they were going to kill him to, take over his throne. So he actually devoured his own children to save them. So so when you're biting in a mince pie, no, don't imagine this for painting. So Zeus survived, and there's all this again, these legends of, similar to other stories where he escaped and he's kept safe. But again, this period around the winter solstice was celebrated around the Roman Empire and that sort of area in the Saturnalia. So again, you got this idea, which is continuing to our present day, the idea of it being a time of debauchery. The office Christmas party probably doesn't generally, on average, get quite up to the debauchery you've probably seen in this picture, but I don't know, maybe one or two people here have been to similar Christmas. No, certainly not. Green tea. I wasn't raised Catholic, but was always grossed out by the ceremony of drinking wine, pretending it was blood, and eating crackers, pretending to eat the body. Gross. Well, yeah. I mean, there is so much of that. The idea of cannibalism, basically, with but and I know I've banged on about this before because it's to do with my book, The Lost Child. But there is so much as we come on here. But again, as I say, Saturnalia is around this time, and the god Saturn is supposed to have eaten his children. So again, at very early stage in history, you've got this tying up of this idea of sacrificing children around this period of time. But again, it's going to be a refrain that I'm going to repeat. But this is the opposite of that idea of, like I was saying, the like these cairns and long barrows, which had the ancestors in them, but it was an idea of the new light coming into the darkest center of death to spark new life. And when you've got these legends and rituals which are around the destruction of new life, it's the absolute reverse of what these winter solstice, I think, what people with these megalithic sites and what they were doing with their rituals there, it's the complete reversal of it. And that seems to be so much as we go through these different traditions that burn up, that seems to be so much about what they deliberately have been doing with these traditions. But so Saturn, the god Saturn, but I guess obviously linked to the planet we call Saturn, that was supposed to be the sun in the golden age. And I think that links to when you talk about the black sun, which was a movement in the Nazis period, the Germany in the Second World War. I remember mentioning in my talk about that. So Saturnalia, this party time that they used to have, was a tribute to this old sun god. And yeah, just as an aside, the idea of a black sun, I heard a lot of talk when I hear snippets of it. So avoid the main news, but you can't avoid it. You work and it's on somewhere. And there was all this talk here in the UK about the finances. Labour are blaming Tories for all these cuts they got to make, and they say, yeah, they left us with a black hole in our finances. They kept using the term black hole. There's other sort of phrases you can use to make reference to this. There's a huge lot of money missing type thing, but it just suddenly caught me, kept referring to a black hole. And could that mean be referring to the black sun, because obviously a black hole is supposed to be a collapsed sun, conventional science. But so yeah, there was Saturnalia. There was also another festival called Calenday, which was a solar new year. And again, that was a time when there was partying, there were presents, and people, the top of the tree, but even the poorest would have the best food that they could have. Even the poorest would have better food than they had any other time of the year. So again, there were these ancient celebrations that were around this time of year that would be reinforcing these different ideas. But yeah, there was also, of course, there was our time of Yule. which was
Need a new picture.
I'm just trying to remember. Oh, well, we'll have the Green Man because this is Liz's beautiful Green Man. So we definitely want the Green Man for Yule. But Tanisha, because again, I've talked about this idea of that the Holy Grail was originally, that again was this solstice period, and that was the ceremony rituals where particularly men who didn't have this natural cycle within them, they would have to go through this ritual. It was a way of getting through the longest, darkest night in the seasonal wheel, the seasonal cycle. So the Holy Grail midwife, the virgin birth of the solar hero, so the world savior, but within the heart of every man, so that every man could be reborn. So it wasn't the idea of one savior, and it was an idea of a transformation in the heart of every man. And apparently, before the Christianization, the ancients would burn an oil lamp in their window to signify they were observing this holy festival. Yuletide greetings was a blessing to wish someone safe passage through this annual psychological death and then rebirth. But so much in the rise of empire, so the Roman Empire and others, men were sent to war in winter on the basis that it was more important that they were back to tend the fields in summer. So they were sent away in winter to foreign lands to go and fight. So all this ritual practice of the Holy Grail around the winter solstice, became a thing of the past. And of course, there were various other laws and repression, like I said, of nature worship, of these old pagan ideas, goddess worship. So having men commit acts of war to amass empiric power leveraged the dark months as a time to amplify the shadow masculine, and this prevented men from turning inward to contemplate, mature, and grow wise. It also impacted men's ability to form close bond with their wives and children because they were away killing and being killed. But yet there is so much in these old pagan traditions that were, well, in a lot of the legends they talk about conflict, but it was around this battle of light and dark, but it was going through the shadow, the darkness, to try and come the other side to get the spiritual. So I'm just going to have a little quick note. Right, we don't want him yet. So we'll stick with our lovely Green Man. So different aspects of the Green Man figure. There was the Oak King and the Holly King. So the two aspects of the Lord of the Forest, and they were known sort of colloquially, collectively as the Green Man. Sometimes portrayed as a wild stag, which is the sacred masculine, and that's apparently where we get the term stag nights. It used to be in ancient times that men would go in the forest, and it would be sort of a rites of passage thing, but it was be about getting inside of this sacred masculine, and not just getting really drunk like on a sort of a rugby weekend and ending up with no clothes on. So the Holly King and the Oak King are personifications of the winter and summer in various neo-pagan traditions. The two kings engage in endless battle, reflecting the seasonal cycles of the year. Not only solar light and dark, but also crop renewal and growth. During warm days of midsummer, the Oak King is at the height of his strength. The Holly King regains power at the autumn equinox. Then his strength peaks during midwinter, at which point the Oak King is reborn, regaining power at the spring equinox and perpetuating the succession. So this ties in as well what I talked about before about the legends of, obviously, who got around the Grail legends, King Arthur, but that obviously has come after many other legends. But this idea of the Fisher King, the king who becomes ill and the land falls in ruin, and then there needs to be a new hero that takes over. The old king is sacrificed, the land is replenished. So again, that's sort of mirroring this idea of this seasonal cycle, which is embodied in these two figures. Robert Graves in The White Goddess identifies other legends and archetypes of paired hero figures as the basis of the Holly Oak King myth. Mentions a few like Gwyn and Gwyffor. Go even to Christian times, Jesus and John the Baptist. But one I'm going to mention in a moment, also Gawain and the Green Knight. So in the Grail parable, the Holly King, he suffers a wound, so wanes like the sun. The Holly King reigned from summer to winter solstice, had to wait to winter solstice. There's a new cycle heralding return of the light. Then his energy would strengthen. So Yule is when the wise Oak King returned. Because unlike holly, which grows quickly, an oak takes a long time to grow to maturity. Why the oak tree, people probably know this, Whisperoon, is favoured for wands and staffs used in sacred rites. Greater cycles impact on energy levels, psyche, and sustainability of the world. When the Oak King takes the crown, he can wed the springtime maiden, but who is also referred to as Ceridwen, the crone goddess. So that one goddess is, again, it's a cycle because she's changeable, the maiden, the crone, different aspects. So the Holly King is the dark side of the masculine. If men didn't seek this wisdom, which apparently, so Tanishka says, that the Holy Grail ceremony used to be able to give them to get through. If they didn't seek wisdom in midwinter from the Grail, then the Holly King would reign and destroy all the goddess created. And we have been held in the dark enchantment and distorted illusions of Hollywood. And I know, who was it? I can't remember his name now. Who was that old conspiracy theorist guy that we heard on? Jordan Maxwell. He was the first person that I heard mention it. I'm not saying he came up with the idea, but the idea that Hollywood was, I think he said it was something that druids used to cast spells. But it seems here maybe the emphasis on it being the wood that's associated with the darker time. And yeah, that can't be an accident that's the name of the place where it's as we know, and as I also did a talk on, it's a prime creator of dark enchantment and these manipulation of of society, of human people, to trap us, because we're not going through these cycles, and we're not coming out the other side to learn to be our Oak King. We're getting trapped in this the stage of Holly all the time. And I mentioned about the stag as well being a sacred figure, the sacred masculine. And and you have the whole thing of the stag's head on the walls of all these old manor houses, the patriarchal aristocracy. I think there was something, wasn't there? I do remember Thomas Sheridan mentioned there was like a white stag, wasn't there? A white hart.
Oh yeah, the white hart, and it was killed.
Yeah, somewhere in England, somewhere like Manchester or something. But it got loose somehow, and it was shot, and it was like, and that was like so much a symbolic thing. That again, that kind of been an accident. So again, it's this idea of destroying something sacred that's within us. But so the Green Man as well is associated with this idea of the Green Knight. and the story of Gawain and the Green Knight, which is, say, another one of these sort of Grail legends, but that starts on Christmas Day. The Green Knight comes into King Arthur's court. He's got green skin. He's in a grand stature. He's like an ancient nature god. And I was struck by this. It's referred to as the Green Man, but also Cern, as in, is it Cernunnos? Not sure how you pronounce it, but the way it was referred to as CERN, CERN, and I thought, blooming hell, the Hadron Collider and all that. And that made me think of that opening ceremony, which I know is the Gotthard Tunnel. It's not CERN, but you know, it seems to be connected with what they're doing there with CERN. And there's obviously been a lot of things with symbology around whatever you want to call it. Well, I probably wouldn't call it Satanism necessarily, but yeah, certainly that they're trying to connect to these different ancient religions and take the power of them. So it just struck me, you know, CERN, maybe again that's a hint back to these ancient. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, but apparently can just be called CERN, and you know, certainly that Gotthard Tunnel opening ceremony. I mean, that was full. That was like Wicker Man on acid, wasn't it? It was like, you know, and then you got that horned figure who does nasty things to a woman, and then some strange sort of child figures comes from it. So that seemed very much in this line of corrupting these ancient pagan ceremonies. But yeah, part of this legend, Gawain and the Green Knight. The Green Knight comes into the court and he says something like, anyone can behead me as long as a year later I can then behead them. So Gawain does the deed, but then he just sort of picks up his keeps talking and then picks up his head and goes off, because he's obviously some sort of god figure. But this idea of the decapitated head, I've talked about that in my Grail talks. So this all comes into this legend, and the story goes on. The next year he's in a forest looking for to keep his end of the bargain, looking for the Green Knight, and he finds this other host, so Bertilac de Haut Desert, and stays with him and his wife. Bertilac de Haut Desert.
What dessert?
We're back to dessert again, aren't we? I don't know. There's a bit of a convoluted story where the host goes away, and then there's the wife there with Morgana of Avalon, and the host says something, when I come back, you've got to give to me what my wife has given to you, and she sort of kisses him on the cheek, and then he kisses him back. On the third day, the last day, she gives him a green girdle to help protect him, but he doesn't admit that to the host when he comes back. So because of that, it looks like the Green Knight is going to behead Gawain, but instead he just sort of gives him a little nick.
Got a flesh wound.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, how can we get past Monty Python? He just gives a little nick on the neck to remind him that he shouldn't let his integrity drop due to fear. But apparently that's where we get the idea. If someone's given a knighthood and they touch the sword on their shoulder or by their neck. But this decapitated head idea, it's apparently about this dominant ego mind being defeated. And so many Grail legends feature a man's head on a platter, and obviously that again, something gets taken forward into the Christian. The legends would bring me the head of John the Baptist. But the idea with, you know, you shouldn't have you should sever the destructive lower mind. You know, you want to have a balance. And apparently, like in the Hindu religion, you've got the Dark Mother, the goddess Kali Ma, and that she's portrayed holding severed heads of various men, or wearing skulls of men as well, whose egos she slew while dancing on their graves. So I know many would sort of, oh, that's just it's a feminist feminist thing gone mad sort of thing. But I think again the origins of it, sorry, I hit my microphone, but it makes sense to me that it's actually really about just getting rid of that part.
It's a hero's journey.
Yeah, hero's journey. So and so often in these journeys there is a goddess who's evil or tries to trick, deceive, or kill the hero. But all of this again is trying to be battling these different aspects, the feminine aspect and the male aspect. So, but yeah, we go over to mention the character that's filled up Christmas for centuries now in some way or another. But St. Nicholas, so there was a St. Nicholas who he was a Turkish bishop. So what some people, Tanishka, was saying, the Christian religion put so much of this idea of the Oak King or the Green Man, and they invested a lot of these qualities into St. Nicholas. Or, as Mind Unveiled said, maybe it was the Templars more specifically. But he was, I think it's pretty much agreed, he was a definite historical figure, a Turkish bishop, although I think where he was born, a place called Patara, it was in what's now, it was in Greece when he was born, but it's now part of Turkey. Turkey again keeps coming back to Turkey. But he was a lot of associations with helping the poor. He apparently had a wealthy family, but he would be give away possessions, give away money to help the poor. And I thought, well, that seems to be again like a template, isn't it? This whole idea, obviously a more modern era, it started with the old original Rockefeller, if you like. This idea of being seen to be a philanthropist and giving away money to charity. Hi, Neil. Great to see you, my friend. So this idea of the rich and powerful being philanthropic, but as we know, certainly in the modern era, it's very much about getting influence and power and just being seen, and also creating this good image to hide so many bad things beyond it. But yeah, legends of Nicholas going door to door to see if children were bad or good, and rewarding those that were good. That could be said to be rewarding those who towed the party line, if you like, in terms of doing what authority said. But yeah, again, a number of early paintings. This one, I think you could say, is one of them, where it's got like a Templar cross, on his garments there. So you've seen already got sort of portrayed as having a red cloak, but obviously very, very far removed from Santa Claus that we see now. But this sort of image, obviously adapted in many ways over time, but they often had this Phrygian cap, known as the fish cap, which the sort of the Pope wears now. So a lot of the garments around it have gone from this time of St. Nicholas into the Catholic Church, Eastern Orthodox Church. But there's a couple of well, there's another one very striking story, a legendary story around St. Nicholas. As he sort of, as a lot of the saints there, invested with these, like, they're superheroes of the day, aren't they? And they're given all these claims that, I think it was claimed when he was a child he could walk and stand tall, immediately, much quicker than normal children. So he's supposed to have been something special from birth almost. But yeah, one of the legends, which is very creepy, again, it's around children. There's a story about these kids being lost and hungry. It feeds him a lot of fairy tales, things like Hansel and Gretel, which I wrote about in my Lost Child book. So these children go to a butcher shop. The butcher invites them in, sort of saying, "Oh, yeah, I'll give you some food to eat." But then he cuts up the children, puts them in a salting tub, and is 7 years pass. But then the butcher's going to sell bits of the kids as ham. So again, we go to this idea of green tea you were talking about, going to church and being freaked out by the sort of sacrament. This idea of eating human flesh, but again, so often around children as well. But St. Nicholas comes by, and somehow he susses that this is children and this is not animals, and he resurrects the children. So in legend, he's given this power, basically, tantamount to Jesus, to be able to resurrect long dead children. So that's pretty powerful thing in legend, at least, that he's gifted with. But it's again, it's tied up around this dark story. Okay, he's the one who saves the kids, but it's this really dark. And I talked in my book, so many of these supposed, what get called fairy tales, are incredibly violent, and so often it's internalizing ideas of children being abandoned, eaten, starving, or the victims of violence. So yeah, so Nick, he was given sainthood. He wouldn't renounce Jesus. After Constantine, when he was emperor and he became Christian, as I say, Christianity suddenly became the state religion. So St. Nicholas was pardoned. Mind Unveiled, makes a point of saying that St. Nicholas attended this Council of Nicaea, which was this massive historical event, seismic on the organization of the Christian church at this, where it had all these different sects that were persecuted and had been going on for centuries, and then suddenly it becomes a state religion of the dominant empire in the world. And this Council of Nicaea was basically to set the rules about how Christianity would be. And apparently there's a story where Nicholas was there. He was right at this foundation of the Christian church, but the Christian church as the state religion of the authoritarian empire that was controlling everyone. And so and apparently there's a story where he actually hit this other guy, Arius, who wasn't agreeing with the plans in the council. So he was sort of like, he was getting in a punch up, but sort of suggesting that he was someone who was on the side of the empire and what was going to become, as I say, the state religion of the Roman Empire. And then of course it goes on into modern era, the Roman Catholic Church and the Vatican, and just a way of controlling and enforcing. There's another story about St. Nicholas saving some daughters from prostitution. But I suppose some people can say, well, it's a bit dodgy. Didn't he want anything for himself? But he was an exorcist. So another part of his sainthood was the idea that he could tame the devil. So and potentially one of these stories might have had something into the connections with trees. I'll mention a bit more in a moment, but obviously we trees are part of the celebration of Christmas. But he went to a village and cut down a cypress tree that was supposed to harbour spirits. The cypress trees were pagan worship, and as I mentioned a bit in a moment, again, this idea of suppressing nature and the old nature religions. So yeah, he was supposed to have cut down a tree because it was harboring evil spirits. So that would seem very much with this idea of repressing the old nature religions.
It's like he's at war with the Green Man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but so much as it came to be, and he became this personification of Christmas. He was then sort of given some of the beneficent things of the Green Man. I suppose Green Man idea of bringing plenty to nature and but I suppose that then sort of came an idea of just sort of giving presents. So let me just move on a bit. So apparently Nicholas's tomb was built on an ancient temple to Artemis and Venus. So got this again, this layering on the pagan religions, Christianity on top of the pagan religions. But you've got all these weird things with relics, and what are classed as relics. They're basically they're bones. They're bits of the dead people that were sainted or whatever. And apparently for a while the church collected the white stuff from his bones, and it was said to cure diseases. Again, this sort of death cult idea, really, of taking human remains. I suppose that goes back into pagan times. The Maria Wheatley talking about how what she was saying, probably priestesses or a lot of women that were considered powerful, they were classed as individual, so they weren't buried as a whole, and often their parts were taken around. This idea of, probably ties into this ancient idea of relics, but it was particularly females apparently, and also sometimes their bones were ground up and put into the grooves on receptacles, and again that might get into this holy grail idea. So yeah, this is a ancient pagan ritual which has morphed again into a lot of the Christian church practices. Now he was embalmed. I'm going to move on actually to the next, because this I think is supposed to be where his original sarcophagus was, and you can see it was broken into. So where he was buried, which I think is in modern day Turkey, in 1096, some Norman and Frankish sailors, so that connected to the Vikings. I was talking in my talk before about how and the connections with Rosslyn Chapel, Knights Templar there, but a group of these sailors, or you could call them pirates, they broke in and stole the remains of, or some of the remains at least, of St. Nicholas, and it was taken to Bari in Italy. And I think Mind Unveiled was going into how that was a center of like these the Knights Templars, these Palatine rulers, and that they wanted to have the remains because, again, it was maybe seen as a sign of power to have these remains with you. But I find it, it's so much. It's taking parts of dead bodies and them being seen as sources of power. Again, this is a thing that goes back thousands of years, but it was the idea that they broke in and stole it. But I just saw it. It just was a news story that I stumbled across when I was researching, just from earlier this month. Recent excavations at the Church of St. Nicholas in Demre and Talia in Turkey have revealed a limestone sarcophagus that may be the burial site of St. Nicholas, the Greek bishop whose life and deeds inspired the legends of Santa Claus. So he lived in the ancient city of Myra during the 4th century. So they found this sarcophagus, and they haven't found an inscription. They're hoping that they will. But that also sort of struck me that just come out again, this story. There was a lot, wasn't there, in the press recently about the Turin shroud, because previously it was said, oh, then this is a fake, and talk about whether it was Leonardo da Vinci that had done it. And then there's been recent stories saying, oh no, it's genuine, and it could actually be Jesus. So I know I'm a conspiracy theorist, but it just makes me think some of these stories, they're coming out now, and it's trying to reinforce these idea of the historical figures of these most important Christian figures, and whether that's trying to reinforce things in the public perception and imagination at this stage. So what they think they found, I think, was the original burial place. Centuries after his death, his remains were moved to the Church of St. Nicholas, which was built over his original burial site. And that's, I believe, this thing here in the picture, as I say, where you can see it was broken into rather dramatically and violently in this 11th century raid, when these modern day pirates, these 11th century pirates, and they took the remains to the Basilica di San Nicola in Bari. And later additional remains were transported to Venice during the First Crusade. And again, Venice was a massive seat of power, as you know, the sort of black nobility. And they were taken during the First Crusade. So that will be, again, linked to the Templars. So this St. Nicholas is such an important saint, but he seems very much one that seems to be at least like a power broker. Having his remains seem to be something that is, it's like a holy grail type thing. His remains seem to be seen as a source of power that gives, like in those Raise the Lost Ark films, where the Nazis in the Second World War were trying to get things like the Ark of the Covenant. Again, it's this idea of getting something, these relics, but to convey power and to use them as something that would be a source of, I would say, just enabling greater authority and control. And as I say, it's interesting that these characters in the 11th century that may have been connected with the Templars broke in and stole these remains, and they're described as sailors, but basically they're pirates, really. They're the sailors that broke in and stole something of, you could say, of great value. And it's this idea. I mean, I saw one of these when I was in Orkney, in the Magnus Cathedral there, on gravestone there. This isn't actually my photograph, but one I took from the internet. But I saw them there. So again, as I say, it was Norman and Frankish sailors, so would have had these Viking origins. But also this uses a Templar symbol, but of course it's the skull and bones, which now most people would think of in terms of pirates, sea pirates, the Skull and Bones, the Jolly Roger. They're apparently called the Skull of Sidon. So usually connected to pirates, but it was used by the Templars. The Knights Templar adopted a white skull and crossbones on black cloth, which became the battle flag of the Knights Templar. So I just mentioned that because, again, this idea, for some people, the Knights Templar are these great heroes, and they're the warriors for light and for good. But they've got this symbol, and again, I talked before about remains and decapitated head, and again, it's this you could say like a death cult. It's and I've just realised there, of course, you've got the crossbones are like an X, and I did a little talk about X and the power of X, and why I seem to keep seeing that symbol all over the place. So perhaps that could be connected to that as well. I know it doesn't seem very much to Christmas, but it's definitely related to St. Nicholas and the Knights Templars that seem to be more and more bound with him. But it's this idea that this sort of figure of goodness that's in the Christmas celebration, it's his link again with violence and with power and with the very highest echelons of the church at its most authoritarian as a state religion, not as a community belief, if you want. I'm going to move over quite quickly because I've gone on about this before, and it is all quite grim, and I'm sorry I'm getting into a little bit like decapitated heads, but this idea again I mentioned before of the teraphim, and the idea of it being the head of the firstborn being taken off and supposedly keeping in contact with the spirit, and so the mummified head was kept because it was seen as an oracle that could foretell the future. And it's just, again, it's this idea of dead children, really, and how they're used to as a way of power, and also of something that's connecting through this idea when mentioned about the veil at its thinnest. But maybe that's again why they're use children in this way, because it's a way of breaking through or trying to get a connection with the other side and gaining supernatural power and trying to use it and control it. Of course, with the Christmas story and with the idea of lost children, you have Herod, of course, and this picture is the three magi who are looking for Jesus when he's born, and they come to Herod to ask him if he knows where he is, and that alerts Herod to the fact that there's this savior king, and he thinks he might be someone who's going to take him over or take over his crown. So he orders all of the firstborn children to be killed. It's just such a it just seems a prevalent theme, this time of what's supposed to be the happiest time of the year, and it's all about the really grim death of children sort of thing. Just going to move through some of the localized different figures around Christmas, and this is a depiction of Saint Lucy, and in many areas she is basically she is Father Christmas, if you like, or she is the figure that that acts instead of Father Christmas, like a female version. So another saint that was important in the Christian church. Now she was she's carrying in this platter here eyeballs, although she's got her sight restored there. But basically, she was someone again that wouldn't renounce Christ. So she was only a child, but apparently her eyes were plucked out. So again, it's really a grim story of something horrible happening to a child. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting from our perspective, and maybe there's people watching from other places, and they will know about these. But coming from English-speaking world, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, and USA, and it's interesting, all these figures that in other parts of the world are so huge. So in northern Italy, Santa Lucia is believed to travel through the night sky on a carriage pulled by a donkey, giving gifts to all the good children who on the previous evening leave out oranges, cookies, and wine, and carrots and hay for the donkey. So very similar to good old Saint Nick. So as I say, many parts of North Italy, might be because in a 13th century story about a disease that blinded children in Verona, they tried to encourage children to make a long pilgrimage to this church devoted to Santa Lucia to save their eyesight, and they were promised gifts on their return. So the children agreed, the disease vanished apparently, and the link between Santa Lucia and giving gifts to children was established. But then St. Lucy, as she's otherwise known, is also recognised in some staunchly non-Catholic parts of Scandinavia. So St. Lucy's Day is celebrated in Sweden, Norway, and parts of Finland on December the 13th. When the Catholics arrived in Scandinavia around 1000 AD, the inhabitants incorporated this new faith into pre-existing belief systems. So you got this layering again of different Christian stories onto pagan stories. But instead of focusing on St. Lucy being blind, the Scandinavians took their cues from the fact her eyes were restored rather than removed. Lucia derives from lux, the Latin word for light. So we're back to the idea of light again. And St. Lucy became to represent light. As antithesis to the dark winter months, she wound up featuring in winter solstice and Christian celebrations. So again, it's this dichotomy between darkness and light. So yeah, further go through. So we got one that many people will be familiar with. He seems to have got more known in the English-speaking world, and that's Krampus. I think it was Krampusnacht. Someone at work was telling me just maybe a few days ago. Hi, Rick and Linda. Sorry, I think I've already said that, Linda. But yeah, really massive in a lot of the German-speaking parts of Europe. So it's black goat-like figure. It's like an evil twin of Saint Nicholas. And as I said before, Saint Nicholas was seen as an exorcist, so he's someone who seemed to have been able to tame the devil. So I suppose in maybe some of the legends, he is like the devil that's been tamed by Saint Nicholas. So a figure dressed like in a sort of bishop, like the Saint Nicholas we saw before, with the Templar crosses, would go around for the good kids, if you like, but he'd have his dark counterpoint, this black goat figure, Krampus, who would punish, kidnap, torture, do nasty things to the kids who weren't so good. And he would carry around a birching rod, like tree branches, to hit the kids that were bad. sometimes, but sometimes also in some places it gets mixed up. A lot of places, St. Nicholas, Santa Claus will have the dark alter ego that will do the dirty work, if you like, for the bad kids. But in certain places, it's all sort of tied up with the same figure, and the sort of St. Nicholas figure will also be portrayed as putting kids in a sack. So, but yeah, Krampus apparently, so Mine and Vale was saying, no written sources before the end of the 16th century. So whether that's just because it was just all in folk legend, I don't know. But he was trying to suggest that, you know, maybe a lot of these things seem to sprung up or become associated with Christmas around this period of the Middle Ages. So was that because it was part of some reset where it was wanting to take over Christmas to reinforce some other darker element to it? I've been reading that, you know, there's been sort of in sort of mainstream press, I think, you know, maybe this year, but, you know, recent times in Austria, there's sort of talk about violence at sort of gatherings where they have parades and they have this people dressed as Krampus, you know, really scary, frightening figures, and they like charging at spectators, you know, and trying to get hold of kids. And I mean, how traumatic must it be to be a little kid and there's something dressed looking like this come running towards you, you know, how people would put their kids through that, and just the idea that this is seen as like a, oh yeah, it's part of the Christmas festivities. Yeah, let's take kids to see Krampus. Whoa, that's going to scare you, but oh, don't worry about it. It's fine. You're just scarred for life, I think, with all sorts of psychological problems. But yeah, you know, Krampus is portrayed as drowning, eating children. Obviously, he's got in his sack here. As Liz mentioned here, he looks like he's got like a Freemasonry garb on there, and often portrayed he's got this big long tongue, the birching rods to hit bad kids. Obviously, he's horned. So again, this might be one of those things again, as we know about the like Pan and the, you know, sort of the horned gods from the ancient pagan religions, and they were seen as positive. And, you know, I mentioned before how the, you know, the stag was this idea of the sacred masculine. And could it be that these were introduced later, and as a way of taking these old legends but perverting them and making them, as we know in a lot of ways, you know, Pan, etc., they were made, the horned gods, into being the devil by the Christian Church, to yeah, to discredit these old beliefs that people had, so that they followed the new prescribed authoritarian religion. So maybe Krampus and others like him, because he's not the only one as well. There's I think this is Belsnickel, this like an old man in a mask, whipped kids if they didn't answer questions right. So, you know, again, this idea of a companion of St. Nicholas, again, in German-speaking Europe, may have been based on older German myth of Knecht Ruprecht. But also, it's in some places, Belsnickel doesn't accompany St. Nicholas, but instead visits alone, and combines both the threatening and benign aspects, which in other traditions are divided between St. Nicholas and the companion figure. So he's all in one. So imagine him having come down your chimney, and that's not really well, it would fit in a lot of horror films. I know they have done a horror film called Krampus. Not that I haven't seen it. I don't know if that it's like a German film or whether it was made by Hollywood. I'm not sure, but yeah, Belsnickel is also a man wearing furs, sometimes a mask, long tongue, again like Krampus. typically very ragged and dishevelled. He wears torn, tattered, dirty clothes, carries a switch in his hand, so very similar again to beat naughty children, but also has pockets full of candies and cakes and nuts for the good children. So he's not all bad. He's a nice chap, but but maybe like our lords and masters, they're nice to us if if we do as we're told. But I guess it is ingraining that from it's like a carrot and a stick, isn't it? It's like, oh yeah, if you're good, you haven't got anything to be afraid of. Of course, we'll look after you. But green tea, some parents do anything to get their children to behave. Well, that's often how it. I mean, now it's usually just, oh, if you're not good, then Santa won't bring you a present. But yeah, I suppose this is another level, isn't it? Really, Rick. Lots of strangers in those Alps, indeed. Yeah. In Celtic mythology, the robin or ruddock carries messages to and from the dead. Oh, thank you. That's very interesting. The word ruddock means red. Oh, that's fascinating. Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, there's going to be a few of these just sort of running through these strange, often dark Christmas legends, shall we say. There's one, I don't think I've got a picture of it, but the bugbears. And I knew often use myself the phrase, oh, that's a bugbear, it's something that's an annoyance. But I hadn't really thought about the origins of it. But they are giants who are said to steal children, like a hobgoblin compared to the boogeyman, other creatures of folklore historically used in some cultures to frighten disobedient children. So this is another. That's an English word. Bugbear was depicted as a creepy bear that lurked in the woods to scare children, described in this manner in the Bugbears. Oh, sorry. So, sorry, that's not related to this picture here. This is another one. This is again in German speaking. This is Swiss German place, the Kinderfresserbrunnen. Swiss German for child eater fountain. Something every city should have, and probably will start to have under Keir Starling, I expect. A painted stone fountain at the Kornhausplatz in Bern in Switzerland. Switzerland's, such a nice neutral place. I'm sure it is an incredibly stunning place. Again from the 16th century. So that era again does seem to pop up a lot. So it was created in 1545-46 by Hans Ging to replace a wooden fountain from the 15th century. The new fountain's original name was Platzbrunnen. But yeah, a literal translation is the fountain of the eater of little children. Because the ogre is wearing a pointed hat, resembling a Jewish one, it's been speculated about the possibility of the ogre being the depiction of someone following Judaism, and that's a blood libel against that religion. Mine and Vale was talking about how this red Phrygian cap did, maybe Canaanites, Phoenicians, Judaism, and linking that with the figure of St. Nicholas and these Phoenicians and Canaanites, and how that morphed into what linked up with the Roman Empire. So this idea of empire, like I say in inverted commas, just any form of repressive authoritarian control, really. Another theory is that it's something akin to Krampus, although he doesn't look like Krampus. He's certainly not a goat-like figure, no horns or anything like that. It just looks very like a ordinary human being, so although again he's got the same traits as Krampus, it's just poor old children being eaten again, and as I mentioned in my book, although I didn't cover any of these, But I was saying how so many oh hi Mab, so many fairy tales, incredibly dark, and about brutality to children, and how that seemed to be reinforced as a central message. And I was thinking, when you read the Bettelheim explanations of fairy tales, and he's talking about it from a psychoanalytical point of view, and they're to do with helping people get through different psychological elements of themselves and that kind of thing. And I'm sure there are elements of that, but when it's things like Hansel and Gretel and things like that, where it is about children being abandoned by their parents because they're poor, and things about kids being eaten, and it's like, isn't that internalizing this horrific thing for kids? Isn't that more maybe what it's about? But again, it's all linking up, because other theories of this statue are that it's a depiction of the Greek god Kronos, Roman Saturn, eating his children. So I think these are all part of the same continuum. And as I say, it's interesting, again, it's that middle-aged sort of 16th century period when so many of these seems to pop up, really. So much people eating, you're right, green tea, and sadly kid eating more than anything else. But this frightening thing. Blimey, you're right. This is Perchta. This is in Czech Republic, a shape-shifting demon witch. Who carried small coins for good kids, but if they were bad, there was a of your stomach, emptied out the guts, and stuffed with straw. Name means bright one, so doesn't sound very enlightened, but yeah, again, very, very dark, frightening figure. And this is supposed to be it all seems to be embodying the darkness in this idea of the underworld around the solstice, at the darkest time. But but maybe seems to be bit more on the dark than the light, I would say. But I don't know. But I guess maybe when you're going up north, things get hard and cold, and it's really, really, really dark. Because we got Finland. Again, this sort of goat figure, again, the very pagan nature, but used to demand gifts, cook and eat kids. It's a familiar theme. But the Nutty Pookie, I think it might have been maybe from the Christian context, or maybe the sort of St. Nicholas context came in, but became more, again, although you can't really imagine it looking at those two there, but became flipped round to being more good guys, to bring presents rather than doing nasty things. But again, it's just prevalent all over Europe. But these less dark, although just I think a little bit weird, really. Tio Nadal, the Yule log. We just have a chocolate cake thing. Actually, Johnny, we were with Ben today, and going down to Rudlow Manor to take a look at it. You'll see that on a future video of Ben. Well, Ben and us filmed it, but we passed, and there was some horned goats that were absolutely beautiful. But yeah, it was a bit funny that we were passing them by this sort of old military site, which some claim is all sorts of things going on there. but yeah, they had these rather cool goats. But yeah, Tio Nadal. So the Yule log, we just have a nice sort of chocolate spongy thing here in England. But yeah, this is in Catalan, in Spain. And they have a thing like a with the piñata in Mexico. So this you see they've got sticks in there, and it's an idea when it gets broken open and there's like sweets or presents and that sort of thing. But it's a weird thing. It's like it's supposed to like ship presents. There's so much around poo, around the Spanish ideas around Christmas, which I suppose is better than eating children. To be fair, you got to say it's a lot lighter than that, but it's still also a little bit weird. So also in Spain, in Catalan, we have these little figures. I don't know if people are familiar with these. Cayena, I think they pronounce it. I probably got that wrong, so apologies to any Catalonians. So this figurine got in different forms, depicted in the act of delivering a Christmas log, Margaret. Absolutely, yeah. So this is a massive thing in the Catalan region, but around Spain and also northern Catalonia, which is going to southern France. But yeah, it literally means the pooper. So, but it's weird how they have these figures beside the nativity scene. It's supposed to be Jesus there in his crib, is the great holy moment, and there's someone having a poop beside it. So, and they've got this red cap again, which is this, well, Minor Vale sort of compares it to this Phrygian cap, which goes back to this Phoenicians and that sort of thing. So exact origin is unknown. Tradition has existed since at least the 18th century, but it's in the Baroque period. Maybe is when it came into the nativity scene, but it's so strange. Why they have it is up for debate. Obviously, not surprisingly, a lot of people think it's very disrespectful and sacrilegious. But others say, oh no, it's well, they say it's about fertilizing the earth, so you could say that's going back to nature, and to ensure that your earth will be fertilized for the next year. But also, I think it's that a lot of people like this idea that he's this sort of the common man, and he's bringing down, or he's whether high and mighty, I suppose literally there in terms of Jesus. There. Oh, hi Connor. Thanks. Thank you very much. And yeah, so it's about sort of bringing down the great. It's the common man just taking a poop wherever he blooming well wants to, whether it's a nativity scene, whether it's Jesus being born. They've got now. You look on the internet, and they've got great ones. They've got like all these modern day figures: Donald Trump, royalty, Madonna, whatever. There's all these sort of modern figure depicted in this same pose, having a poop. So they're worth. He's only in because of the poo. He come in at a great moment. So yeah, absolutely mental. But as someone pointed out, the Catalan anthropologist Miguel Delgado, against the charge of this being blasphemy, he said the grotesque, rather than a negation of the divine, may actually signify an intensification of the sacred. For what could be more grotesque than the crucifixion of Jesus Christ? A public bloody torture and execution is a defining moment in the story of Christianity. Well, I suppose he's got a point. Like I say, it's not as bad as eating kids, is it really, as well? But I don't know. It's just strange. It's a little bit of a light relief in a way. There is one. Yeah, have a look on the internet. I should have included the pictures here, but you'll be able to find it. Green tea. But yeah, they've got some great ones on there. So I suppose I quite like that in terms of it's like just trying to puncture any sort of idea of self-importance of the powerful. So I suppose in a way you could say that's a bit of a anarchic, Ray for the little guy having a poop. And let's face it, there's not many public toilets these days. So I think this should be a protest against that, if nothing else. But yeah, we're back to the sort of slightly scary figures. This rather grand gentleman, look at that. Is it Russia? Dead Moroz, Father Frost, freezes people like the Ice Queen in Narnia. Again, used to kidnap kids, hold them to ransom to get gifts from parents. Then, under the influence of the Orthodox Church, he became good and gave presents to kids, and adopted a lot of the traits of St. Nicholas, or what were given to St. Nicholas. And here he's looking like a rather austere and stern version of St. Nicholas, isn't he? But quite magnificent in his own way. In the snowy snowy forest. But yeah, still more. So this Pierre Frottard. This is around France. Again, he hits children, spanks them to punish them. But like you say, he's like the nasty alter ego of the good St. Nicholas, and here this St. Nicholas is very much portrayed just basically like the Pope or a bishop. But yeah, you see the nasty version's got his sack there. First story in 1852, so that's not that long ago, really, compared to a lot of things. And the story, again, very similar. It links in with that story, as I said, that legend about St. Nicholas, where he, these kids that were killed by this evil butcher who was going to serve them up as food, and he resurrected them. So this Pierre Frottard was an innkeeper, and similar to that story, he tries to boil up these kids. But St. Nicholas saves them, and then he forces this innkeeper, Père Frottard, to be his assistant. But again, you've got this dark and light there. You've got, or I suppose in another interpretation, it's just all dark, really, because you've got the authority religious figure here saying, "Oh yeah, we'll give you nice things," but this nasty fucking dodgy bloke with a weapon and a sack ready to nick your kids is right alongside him. So it's not, when you've got an assistant like that, how good are you going to be there? You know what I mean? So it's pretty frightening. This is a representation of like a recent one someone drawn up. This character Hans von Trotter, or otherwise known as Hans Trapp, and this was actually, again, he was a historical figure in the 15th century, and he was a German knight. So again, Mind Unveiled made lots of connections that he was basically like a Templar knight, or I suppose if he was a German knight, there'd be the Teutonic knights, the Germanic version of the Knights Templar, but same sort of principle. And he was a historical figure. He was given these castles. He was very much like an aristocrat, and but he had all these falling out with, I think, with the religious authorities of where he'd been given this ownership of the land. So he built an artificial dam and flooded this city. the people appealed to this Pope, or these sort of religious people who've been deposed appealed to the Pope. Von Trotter refused to go. This sort of dark stories arose around him that he became this legendary boogeyman figure. So he was said to be violent, looting travelers, had made a pact with the devil, and then he's said to have been turned to a scarecrow as punishment, from God, because he'd eaten flesh. So there we go, he's a flesh eater. So he was turned to a scarecrow. So he's dressed in straw, waiting for young victims. Said to have cut a kid up in pieces and ate the flesh, but then he was struck by lightning and killed. So there we go, there's a happy end. But now he's become this black knight, this dark figure. But again, he's associated with Christmas. This, well, as I say, a historical figure, probably wasn't a nice guy, but he was, I don't know, maybe connected with the sort of these holy orders, knights. So he probably did do nasty things, but then he became all this legendary nasty stuff got added into it. But he's associated with Christmas, and in certain areas, they have him as their Christmas figure that goes around with this Christ child. And again, you've got this dark figure that's associated with the dark times. This one, I must admit, I sort of lost track where this is actually from, but here, whether this is Saint Lucy, but again, you've got a female figure here who seems to be the good light figure, and I guess these two look like they've been singled out as the good kids, and they're going to get the embrace of the light, the Queen of Light, if you like. But then you've got the nasty Krampus type, very scary dude coming in behind in the window with his nasty birch ready to hit. And look, like she's dobbing them in. Look, these are the bad kids. Look, and they're all huddled up, fearing for their life. Look, get them. So the nice ones, there we go, and the nasty figure's going to come in and punish the others. Mr. Hankey is a Christmas poo. Rick Halden. That's quite true. I think they must have been inspired by some Catalonian stuff there. But yeah, I mean, as I say, battle between dark and light. But I don't know, especially when it's a time that's supposed to be for children. There's one thing to just say, oh, you got to be, be a good boy, or you won't get a little present from Christmas, Father Christmas. But to actually have oh no, you're going to be abducted, tortured, eaten. That's going on a whole other level, I would say, a whole other level. But yeah. So again, it seems to be around these ideas of control and also a deep psychological torture from a very young age, and other things we won't go into, especially on YouTube, but other things that a lot of people allege about how children are used by those that wield power. And this does all seem to be connected with that. Absolutely, Mari. Yeah. Sorry, I think you came in maybe just after I'd mentioned Saturnalia, but yeah, I did mention it earlier. But Saturnalia certainly around this time, around the solstice time, absolutely a time for drunken revelry, and yeah, not for the children. Yeah, a time of wild partying, basically. So just, a couple of more sort of friendly, nice, cuddly Christmas creatures. And look, oh, that's nice, isn't it? Because they got a little posing thing with the Wicked Witch type thing, and you got a little kids. And look, the parents have said, "Oh, look, you kids, look, you go and pose for a photograph in the giant cauldron and pretend you're going to be eaten. Oh, that's nice. That'll be a nice photo for you show grandma. So this is Grilla, Gryla, Iceland. So this is in Iceland. She's a giantess who likes the flesh of children, of course. And she's also got 13 sons, called the Yule Lads, which sounds maybe like a sort of a charity Christmas single, but by some rugby team or something. But these, as you see pictures of these Yule Lads, and they look a bit like basically like the seven dwarfs, gnomes in cars. Where's Liz? Gnomes in cars, but they've got these red hats. But there's 13 of them, one for each day of these, almost like the 12 days of Christmas, but there's 13 of them. So they're Gritta's sons, but each one has a different kind of mischief that they cause people. And so I think a lot of people, go around in Iceland pretending to be these Yule Lads, banging on the doors, like a bit of a trick-or-treating thing at Halloween. But again, this sort of gnome's hat. Again, my novelle was linking it to this Phrygian cap. And also in Iceland, they have a Yule cat, a cat who hunts and eats kids. Well, I mean, I know I'm getting a bit like a stuck record, but it is pretty much all over. That's the main point of Christmas, it seems to be, really. Gnomes in cars, indeed, and also eating children. That's a verse that we haven't added and probably never will, let's hope. But Grilla wasn't associated with Christmas apparently until the 17th century. So that's interesting. So obviously maybe she was a legendary figure. But why would you then to the 17th century? Oh yeah, now we're going to make it part of Christmas, because obviously nothing says Christmas like some sort of giant child-eating witch. That's absolutely perfect for Christmas, isn't it? It's just the kind of message that we want. And so there you have your little kids posing in a cauldron as if they're about to be eaten. That's obviously the kind of message you want your children to internalize, to go up and grow up for the rest of their lives. So what Tanishka was saying, this idea with these sort of characters around the well, obviously I'm concentrating on Europe here, but it's anchored this idea that that young people had to give up their wild self, or give up this part of themselves that was sort of unruly, natural, in exchange for this devil's bargain, that they to get the good stuff from those in authority and to avoid being horribly punished. They had to do what they had to toe the party line. Tanishka mentioned that in the old pagan times there were these half gods who were said to come down the chimney wearing red. In the later version, obviously a post-Christianized version, if they could recite Bible verse to kids, they got candy. If they couldn't, they were bad. That showed they couldn't be indoctrinated, and the wild spirit was broken by the rod. This Ruprecht type character, he's devil servant of Father Christmas, maybe, or Santa Claus. The devil servant would whip the child or take him in a sack. Apparently in the 19th century, a writer, Theodore Stom, described a sadomasochistic rites enacted by bishops who visited homes in the dark hooded Rome to give whippings. So maybe churches were actually doing these things, and they weren't just legendary stories. But as I said before, it's these sort of figures they're all emphasizing the darkness, not the light to come. There doesn't seem to be much about the light to come. And yeah, as I mentioned before, this taking of young life, it's that's the very reversal, the opposite of the idea of the ancient winter solstice, where from death, new life is going to begin again. This seems to be so much about taking the young life. That's how it seems to have been ingrained in the legends. And yeah, I know it's like with the little kids there, you're having a fun and you're having a bit of a laugh with it. But it's just that this message is such, it just, it's in the psyche. And when I wrote my book, you know, about the prevalence of lost children in our society, sadly, in actuality, physically, materially, but also how it's weaved into all the stories, and we get now in modern films and books. And I was linking it, you know, goes way back to fairy tales, old folk tales, legends, and these are more examples of it. Mind Unveiled makes the point that Templars, Jesuits, all these people are homes for orphanages in troubled places, and we know a lot of things. It's been in the news again here in Church of England about abuse scandals. We know it's something that's been going kind of chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Indeed, we maybe won't go any further, but yes, indeed. And yeah, I mean, Mind Unveiled linked this in as well with things like, well, he didn't really mention child migration, but he was talking about evacuation during the war, but and the orphan trains in America. But again, this ties into this idea of children being taken away from their homes, and this idea of yeah, children being abducted and children being taken away from their families, and all the rest of it. And these very real things that happened on a sort of almost industrial scale, which, you know, I did write about in my book, and available in all good booksellers, as Ben would say. And this all follows this whole sort of Christmas story. What have we got with the next picture? Now, well, that's a bit nicer, isn't it? The holly and the red berries. But obviously, again, going back to, I think, a lot of the positive side, or with connections with the natural world. And one of the things, although not all good, but the connections with mushrooms and psychedelics, my novel talked about. And I haven't read these books, but I will get them. But there's a book, wasn't it, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, John Allegro, which my novel mentions, and there was another one which I think I haven't got. Oh, Holy Mushroom. Something about the evidence of mushrooms in Judeo-Christianity, but there have been people who have written about the connections of psychedelics and mushrooms and the Christian Church. So, I mean, this is interesting, the idea of a corrupt priesthood using psychedelics to program people. And of course, jumping forward to like the 20th century and beyond, you know, the MK Ultra, the Manson family, all those counterculture things. So again, these things are perhaps centuries old in different forms. But yeah, these psychedelic mushrooms, well, mentioned the Fijian cap, some of the, obviously the red mushroom, the top mushroom, you know, again, some of the imagery, the coloring on the garbs of and the sort of priesthood might have connections to that. But in terms of Christmas, there's old Norse legends about leaving magic mushrooms as gifts in winter. Evergreen trees are where mushrooms are found around them. So connections, idea of these evergreen trees. But yeah, going back to the positive side of this nature worship, and obviously further back than that, I think I mentioned in my talk about around Rosslyn Chapel. There's loads of portrayals, carvings of green men in that chapel and other chapels, mistletoe, and this connects in around the figure of the original Father Christmas in England. So basically, these old empire, or the empires from the Romans, I'm sure happened before that as well, and these sort of state religions stole this ancient knowledge and used it. Now, one of the origins for the idea of Santa going through the sky in his sleigh may stretch back to the idea of Odin, said to travel the sky on his great hunt, and he would decide who would die and prosper, accompanied by a horned goat, symbol of Pan, nature god. Obviously became demonized in the Christian religion, but maybe that was an origin of the naughty and nice list, as well as this idea of flying through the sky. Earlier Nordic myth, there's an ancient deer mother who drew a sleigh of the sun goddess at winter solstice. Regenerative powers, gestate and rebirth, this rebirth of the sun in the midwinter. The antlers of the deer mother were frequently depicted as like a tree of life carrying birds, sun, moon, stars. In the Latvian and Lithuanian cultures, the goddess flew across heavens in a sleigh pulled by horned reindeer and threw pebbles of amber, symbolizing the sun, into chimneys. But then others talk about Siberian shamanic tradition, where shamans ingested psychotropic amanita mushrooms, and shamans dressed in the colors of the mushrooms, red and white, and entered homes via the chimney due to snow obstructing the front door. I just sort of thought, I mean, it's certainly not in snow in different part of the world, but I noticed when I was in Turkey in some of the ancient settlements there, I think Kachahoyek, but they had reconstruction, and their houses again used to enter through the top. I'm not quite sure the reasons why, but again, like through the roof. And Turkey, or what's now Turkey, is where St. Nicholas was from. But yeah, but I like the shamanic mushroom one a little bit better, maybe. There's one thing again, the reindeer. I suppose you could equate them slightly with the stag, obviously a horned creature in a similar way, similar family. But yeah, apparently, interesting aside, the reindeer are often talked about or given name. They're sort of referred to as male, but male reindeer shed their antlers in winter. So are Santa's reindeer castrated? That's a bombshell for you. So yeah, some of these versions of different legends of Odin giving gifts to the good, but also sometimes abducting the bad and punishing them. So maybe that again could be origin of a lot of these people like Krampus and Belsnickel. So maybe the idea of this good people getting rewards, bad being punished, maybe that it goes back to some of the Norse legends as well. Some people surmise that the idea of flying reindeer, that again might be something that goes back to shamanic practices and to do with mushrooms. The fly agaric, these red mushrooms with the white spots, strong hallucinogenic, but it can be really bad for you. But it's apparently not so bad for you if you drink the piss of a creature that's eaten the psychedelic mushroom. So then you get some of the trippiness without the badness to health, although you've got to drink the piss of apparently they, in what's now Lapland, and of course now the legend, like Father Christmas, he lives at the North Pole, and you have stuff around Lapland as being where it is. So yeah, from that area, the Sami people, which is all close to where we were at the top of Norway, right by the Finnish border, by the Russian border as well. But yeah, the Sami people, where they are up there, very interesting people that got very different culture, that sort of separate to a lot of other cultures. But so yeah, so often they would drink the piss of the reindeers that had eaten the psychedelic mushrooms. So maybe there you get the way the reindeer are flying, man, and that might be where it comes from. It's making this up. I'm not making it up. I've read it by people. Um, Apparently the high lasts for a long while. So Johnny Fettler's going for mince pies. He's now going to go on to reindeer piss. But yeah, who had the idea first? I don't know. Taking the piss, Margaret. Yeah. Well, we've had poop, and now we've had piss. So it's very seasonal, isn't it? Very seasonal. That and killing kids. Anyway, but we're trying to get into some lighter, more positive bits of Christmas, because it's definitely there, and but I haven't quite got there yet. Talked about Saturnalia earlier, but in this country there was, I suppose, if you like, a similar thing. It was like these idea of lords of misrule. So apparently it got frowned upon because it used to get out of hand, but it's very much like the sort of carnival idea that they have a lot of places, where it's like for a day, like the fool, someone who's poor, they can sort of rule over the masters, and yeah, people get to sort of break off their shackles, and for one day a year, the poor and subservient slaves, back in the Roman times, the Saturnalia, often, the slaves maybe had got served food by their masters as a sort of a reversal, and this sort of lords of misrule stuff. And there used to be things where the children used to be, there used to be child bishops, sort of, for the day, and they used to be able to sort of be like king for a day, sort of thing, and boss their masters around, if you like. So, but again, it's this idea of sort of riotous partying around. So yeah, there used to be a lot of wild partying going on. So this it yeah, stretches back to the Roman era and probably before that. But I suppose it's the idea of the darkest time, and also that this idea that you need a release, maybe something to keep the masses happy when they're in the most darkest time. But again, it got out of hand, and I think a lot of the practices were banned. And this used to go around in the sort of medieval times, this misrule. Used to get like a Prince of Christmas or Captain of Christmas. So, but again, I guess you've got an idea. Again, it's not about peace and light. It's about wild partying, but it got out of hand a lot. And as a lot of people know, when the after the Civil War, when the Puritans got in charge for a few years under Oliver Cromwell, they banned Christmas, and Christmas was banned it was banned in places in America, and in Boston famously, or Massachusetts in general, banned Christmas for a while. And I mean, the thing is, in terms of they were right in terms of it's not part of Christianity. It's not mentioned in the Bible, and as I say, the choosing of an arbitrary date, the 25th of December, as being Jesus. If there was an historical Jesus, it didn't have anything to do with him, and yeah, it. I mean, obviously, the Puritans didn't like it. It was tagging onto all these pagan rituals and celebrations as well. But I suppose they're right in terms of if you're saying about a Christian celebration, then it's not really got anything to do with it at all. Not in terms of the strict biblical, but yeah, it's got all these, again, all these links with the pagan, and so there would be, I suppose, positive side around this in terms of, as I say, there was a bit of an overturning of roles where the poor and the downtrodden got for a day to maybe sort of rule over their masters, or it was only for a day. Maybe this ties us in as well. Like I say, the idea, some of these things about overthrowing the bad king and having a new king, and some of these ancient rituals, they involved, I can't remember where it was, but there was one I mentioned before on a different live stream where some poor guy was chosen. He was going to be the new king, but it was like a mock killing of the actual king, and he was sort of locked away as if he died. And this substitute was like, oh, he's king for a day and everything, and got given all, probably had a great day, literally for a day, and then after that he was ripped apart by wild horses or something, and then he was sacrificed. So perhaps in a way that is tying into things like that, this idea of the substituting of the king or the rulers, and the overturning of things. And it's interesting as well, like the mummers plays that I noticed. This sent me an advert for one in London this year. So there are people are still doing them, but those sort of mummers plays which fed into our modern pantomimes that we still have around Christmas time here in the UK, and so much of that was around, which is still persisting now into pantomime, the idea, and I know it's gone into a whole other level now in terms of whole of society, but you had, the pantomime dames where you used to have the guys in drag, playing these annoying women, and then you had the principal boy that was a woman playing a boy, and that apparently comes out of these mummers plays, which again used to have this idea of dressing up and reversing roles. So I'm not sure how that would tie in. I guess it's a sort of this battle of dark and light, and I suppose you could make a claim for how it's all part of that idea. Peter Pan was usually a woman, quite right, yeah. But yeah, what are we doing next? So this is the nice. Well, he still looks a bit mischievous, but this is a sort of like, if you like, a bit of a sort of more pagan Father Christmas. So there was a tradition in England for a long time of this Father Christmas figure, which became a little bit has become subsumed with the St. Nicholas Santa Claus in later years. But here you see he's riding on a horned goat, but he's very much in the tradition of the sort of green man. But yeah, he's got a bowl of wassail, because wassailing again was that was a tradition, I suppose. Maybe now, well, you don't really I'm not really aware of it happening much anymore, but it's another thing that's died out. But carol singing, where people used to go door to door singing carols and getting getting gifts or something in exchange for that. But used to be a tradition of wassailing, where you go around people's houses, maybe singing a song, or maybe dressed up as some figure, and maybe get some food given to you by the host. Again, that got a little bit out of hand in a lot of places, and people would be almost breaking into people's houses and demanding and stealing stuff from them. So again, there was still a dark side where people would maybe take advantage of it. But it was the idea was that maybe again the poor it would be something in the darkest time when they were struggling most to survive, and they could go door to door. And I guess this idea of you get this idea of charity at Christmas, which has persisted, the idea that you can give gifts to help the poorest, the people who are struggling at a time when it's darkest. But yeah, I mean, this is like I say, he's back into the more of the, let's go back, we're not ready for him yet. So more than it's still in that sort of pagan nature worship. So okay, he's on a horned goat, but he's just like riding him just in a nice non rude way, and he's just a creature of the earth. Although is that has he got a little kid with him there? Has he got a little kid with him with some sort of stubble on there? I don't know. Oh dear. Let's hope not. Yeah, let's hope he's not doing something wicked with the kid. But anyway, I think it's sort of a bit more of a jolly. But nature worship, it still ties in with a lot of the things that we celebrate. Obviously, the Christmas tree is often talked about in this country, the coming over with Prince Albert, where the introduction of a lot of the Germanic ideas of Yule. So, like I say, Puritans in a lot of places banned Christmas, and there was also in different ways with the church would maybe try and suppress some of the old pagan Christmas. Yule used to be the name for the winter solstice celebration, but in Germany it lived on much more through these times. So, and a lot of the Yule traditions from Germany, Prince Albert, he was credited with bringing a lot over, but I think some had already come over. But apparently ceremonial trees, they do go back quite a way. Ancient Turks were said to adorn wishing trees. We've just seen that lovely wishing tree that inspired Tolkien again in Avebury yesterday. But so wishing trees with ribbons for the sky god by Elgan. Druids, of course, venerated trees and decorated them. Tree worship was known amongst Vikings and Saxons. Martin Luther is apparently said to have been the first to put lights in the form of candles on the tree, representing the sky and the heavens where the light of Jesus came. Again, got the idea of light coming through. So, but medieval times, holly and ivy and other evergreens were especially sacred, signs of good luck. Vegetation that flourished in the cold winter gave hope. But you also have things like Roman wreaths, back to that time, were signs of success and status. Also, the Egyptians, the Chinese saw evergreens as symbols of eternal life. So medieval families made these into circles and hung on doors or laid on tables. But on the 12th night, there's this tradition: you've got to take the decorations down. and it's unlucky if you don't. And apparently that was because country folk. So in the old days, it wasn't plastic. It was the real greenery that had come in from the forest that they brought into their homes. And apparently the country folk believed, as many of us wouldn't argue with them, maybe, that there were elemental figures, elf sprites, that lived in the greenery in the forest. But it was sort of said that in that sort of Christmas period, there was some sort of peace where the elementals wouldn't cause mischief. But after this 12th night, then there wouldn't be this protection of the season or whatever. So if you left this greenery in your house beyond that time, these decorations, then you would be inviting trouble, because the spirits would then be able to wreak havoc all year round in your house. So yeah, where are we going to? But ironically, this old Father Christmas idea, he had a bit of a comeback with the Puritan ban, because he became a little bit of a symbol for Christmas. The Puritan ban wasn't popular. The Puritans, in general, they were rather repressive. Their regime, dancing and singing, I think, were banned anytime. So it was all just very austere, and people want to have a chance of celebrating and enjoying life, and celebrating life. So actually, Father Christmas, in a way, became a bit. He was sort of seen on protest pamphlets in the time, protesting against the ban on Christmas, and also in these mummers plays that I mentioned before. There was a Father Christmas figure would feature in those. So I think this picture here is Robert Seymour in 1836. So this sort of pagan druidy type of Father Christmas. So in that time, it was bearing a holly or Yule log, and it was only sort of with the 19th century came over from this idea of Santa Claus, which was like a Dutch version of Saint Nicholas, largely through the British exposure to Dutch colonists in the USA, and then Father Christmas and Santa blurred, and sort of morphed into one figure. So by the late 1800s, illustrations had lost the pagan influence, and Father Christmas started bringing toys. Apparently, Santa Claus, Nicholas, disappeared from New York written accounts for several years over this sort of over like a 20-year period. But then there was some character, John Pintard, a businessman, descendant of the French Huguenot family. He mentions St. Nicholas in some private papers, and then 4 years later, he helped found the New York Historical Society. He had a friend, Washington Irving, the writer, wrote a satirical history of New York that came out on December the 6th, which is St. Nicholas's Day. And this is in 1809. And that mentioned Santa Claus parking his wagon on rooftops. And there was a drawing by Pintard which had St. Nicholas in that sort of, like the picture I showed earlier, really, in that more like a austere bishop, but he looked a bit austere. Then Clement C. Moore, A Visit from St. Nicholas, aka also known as the 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, this poem, and that sort of got this jolly modern presentation of Santa. And then so the story, the night before Christmas, it changed the image of Santa into this magical loving figure. So I think it was an unknown author who originally wrote it. So I suppose if you had a conspiratorial mind, would say, well, someone's planting it there and trying to get people into that sort of mindset. And the argument is it's used as a sort of mind indoctrination, if you like, or to getting people into a certain frame of mind, like I say, to follow the authoritarian line, maybe. So this Clement Clarke Moore later claimed to be the author in 1837, but as I say, he wasn't the original. He sort of rewrote this poem. But yeah, then we started to get the images of Santa Claus, which has now been made more into a Hollywood thing. And of course, as a lot of people know, Coca-Cola famously, 1931, I think it was, these adverts, they had this big red garment, Santa, the big red suit. As has been said, though, Santa was or Santa Nicholas characters were portrayed in red before. It wasn't that they were never portrayed in red before Coca-Cola, but they were also in other colors, and it became more certainly a fixed thing after Coca-Cola that it was, you can't imagine him wearing anything else really. So of course you've got a connection there with the major corporations and advertising and all those sort of things, and showing how all of our perceptions can be just put in so that people, like, well, long before I was around, wouldn't. Well, I suppose not long before around, if in 1931, but it's difficult now. It's difficult now to get that image out of your head of Santa Claus, and of course all the Hollywood films have pushed it and made it even more emphasized. But yeah, like I say, there's maybe more and more people who are trying to get back to the ancient Yule celebrations and back to those solstice. Just an interesting aside, I was quite astonishing, but as I say, the Puritans in Scotland, actually before it became a countrywide thing in the UK, the Puritans sort of took hold in Scotland. Was it sort of the Calvinists? They took hold in Scotland earlier, and so I think it was banned in Scotland earlier than the rest of the UK. But apparently the ban on Christmas in Scotland was only repealed in 1958. So I'm sure they had been celebrating it before then, but it's one of these things that never actually got changed in the law books. But then they sort of focused their debauch party time more on Hogmanay, the New Year, and that's become a bigger thing in Scotland than Christmas, and then Burns Night, which I think is it something like the 15th of January, I think. So so yeah, that was another big celebration that they used to have in Scotland. But so I think, so as I mentioned, like Prince Albert bringing the German influence in during the Victorian Christmas, and a lot of our Christmas feelings now, I'd say, apart from the sort of the big bloke with a beard and the red suit, the Santa Claus, there's a lot in our heads which has got this idea of the Victorian Christmas and the snowy scenes you see on Christmas cards, and of course Charles Dickens, and particularly the Christmas Carol, which has been lots of films and all the rest of it. And I think, and I just sort of spend a little bit of time towards the end now to go over, because Andy Thomas was talking about the Christmas Carol, and he was saying how he loved it. He loves Christmas anyway, but he was saying how it's good to maybe to read the original text. Obviously, there's so many film versions out there, And I'd never actually, although I'd had this book, I think I gave it to my dad years ago, bless him. So he passed away. It's one of the things I brought home with me, but I'd never got around to reading it fully. I think I started it one year, didn't finish it. So finally this year, I read the original text Christmas Carol. So this is it's a compilation, if you like, of his Christmas books, because he wrote a number of them, not just Christmas Carol. He did a series of books around Christmas. Which is there's one featuring goblins, which Mine Unveiled mentioned. I haven't read that yet, but I may get around to it. But again, he seems to be wanting to unusual ideas of Christmas, if you like, and perhaps he wants to connect with these pagan ideas. And it's quite interesting because I think it's persisted a bit now, and it was also, but certainly in the Victorian era, like with the Christmas Carol, Christmas became associated with telling ghost stories. And that again is a bit strange when you think about it, because it's supposed to be this time of celebration and light, and the Savior has come to the world, if you want to look at it from the Christian point of view. But I suppose, really, I mean, as Andy Thomas mentioned, again, it's around the thinning of the veil. The veil between worlds is said to be thin around the solstice, and he mentioned about many people passing away at this time. So I suppose it's appropriate that there's ghost stories around it, because again, it's this looking at the underworld and the connection of the underworld, the bridge between the underworld and the other side, our world, and the worlds of light and dark. So it's very appropriate that a ghost story is prevalent this time. So for Dickens to use the form of the ghost story to make a story that gives this message that, I mean, people could talk about it as being a Christian message, and Christianity's mentioned, of course, and it's around these ideas of charity, giving to the poor, being generous to people worse off than yourself, which you could say were all supposed to be Christian sentiments and things like that. But I wouldn't say it's a Christian story, but it's very much about reinforcing these ideas of good. But so just quick little analysis of it, and this is a great picture. So this is the ghost of Christmas present. So we'll get to in a moment, but just a few thoughts as I was reading through A Christmas Carol. So yeah, as I say, it's a ghost story. It mentions Hamlet's ghost at one stage. So it's got this continuum of great works of literature that talk about ghosts. And it is, again, when I talked about these long barrows and cairns where the light penetrates, and it is a place also where the remains of ancestors were. So, and this idea of being of a haunting, and a haunting from the ancestors, but that doesn't have to be a bad haunting. It can be a positive one. And when I'm around the stones and I'm saying thank you to the ancestors, and can they give us strength in this time of our struggle. And I've mentioned before about this is like maybe a winter solstice for humanity, what we're going through, not just now in this particular year, but so and I think Dickens himself referred to the story pleasantly haunting us. So I suppose for some people it would be, well, isn't that just another thing with like the nasty thing to kids, and it's a way of the darkness just encroaching on the time that's supposed to be all about light and the good. But I suppose again it's this idea of you needing the shadow, but as long as the shadow doesn't become the overriding thing that dominates and controls. So I think this story is about, or there's so much about where it's like this pagan past, the winter solstice, the Yule, our ancestors, and it's how they're returning to us, and how that can bring the light from the underworld to make us renew our lives. So there's lots of references within A Christmas Carol to darkness, just talking about it being really dark and gloomy and that sort of thing. The ghost of Christmas past, he's described as being like a child and like an old man. So again, you've got past and present within the same figure. But he's got the thing where he's shining light. He's got like a beam of light like coming out of his head. And he wears, like, it's described as an extinguisher cap, which Scrooge pushes down over the ghost, but he can't quite extinguish the light. So again, within the text, I think it's about light within dark. But this Christmas present character, which is this character here, I mean, he's very much he's not described in these terms within the text, but he is the old pagan Father Christmas. Liz said he's like doing like is it the magician from the tarot cards, you know, sort of as above so below maybe, and pointing up there with the staff. But he's portrayed in the book of sitting on a mountain of, you know, food, meats, all this good food. It's all about abundance. So he, you know, he's the green man. He's wearing green with these furs. He's a nature spirit. He's got these he's described as hung with living green, look like the perfect groves. So it's very much, you know, to the druid sacred sites. Bright gleaming berries, holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back the light. A mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney. A jolly giant bore a glowing torch in shape not unlike Plenty's horn, shed its light on Scrooge. Again, like I say, so much the language of it's about light in the darkness. But yeah, he's so much this old pagan Father Christmas, the green man, and bringing back the nature spirits and the goddess of the earth and all this worship of nature. And there's some really striking passages in there. He talks. Scrooge goes to the Ghost of Christmas Present, and he's saying, well, basically, you and your spirit family, you restrict people's opportunities of innocent enjoyment. I guess he's basically talking about, because he's saying that these spirits are like, I guess, the church. You know, saying, oh, you say people can't do this and that on certain days, or this sort of thing. And the Spirit says, there are some upon this earth of yours who lay claim to know us, and who do their deeds of passion, pride, ill will, hatred, envy, bigotry, and selfishness in our name, who are as strange to us and all our kith and kin as if they have never lived. Remember that and charge their doings on themselves, not us. I mean, how perfect is that? It just, all these, like I say, these empires that claimed all this divine power, claimed to be ruling in Christ's name, and all these other deities before that. St. Nicholas invested all these powers, and then his relics, so, you know, taken to enforce this power of perhaps the Templars, the churches, the authoritarian, the empire. And they say they're doing it for the spirit. They're doing it for the light. They're doing it because they'll keep us safe. Stay safe. Just come to us for the information. We'll look after you. And it's like, No, the Spirit's saying, all these deeds of passion, pride, ill will, hatred, they may say they're about spirit, but no, they're just doing it for themselves, for their own agenda, and they claim it's because of a spiritual purpose, but that's not true. That's the opposite. This Tiny Tim, a sort of lost child or a potential lost child. And Scrooge said, is he going to die? And again, you know, the Ghost of Christmas Present is turning around what Scrooge has said before about the poor. I was like, you know, are there no workhouses? Are there no prisons? And the Ghost of Christmas Present is just basically saying, oh, well, you know, as far as you're concerned, if you be like to die, you better do it and decrease the surplus population. Where have we heard things like that before? Decrease the surplus population. If man you be in heart not adamant, forbear that wicked cant until you have discovered what the surplus is and where it is. Will you decide what men shall live and what men shall die? It may be that in the sight of heaven you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child. O God, to hear the insect on the leaf pronouncing on the too much life among his hungry brothers in the dust. Again, perfect for now. Bill Gates is Scrooge. Just following soon after that passage about like the church authority is not the same as the true spirit of the earth. Because this Ghost of Christmas Present, he's the green man, he's the abundance of life. It's about life, and it's the negation of all what these people are doing, which is saying restrict life. There's too many people, there's too much life. This is the very, I know we know this, but to see it like in this text, the Christmas Carol, this Victorian text, is just so completely apt for now, because it's exactly the same as they were in the old times. There's some bits that you get in the text which you don't get in the films. The Bob Cratchit's family, they sing about a lost child traveling in the snow, and it's sang by Tiny Tim. So I suppose that's the thing. He is a lost child, and this possible ghost of Christmas to come shows a potential parallel universe where Tiny Tim's died. There's bits in there where he's taken by, I think this is still by the Ghost of Christmas Present, he's taken to a bleak and desolate moor where monstrous masses of rude stone were cast about, as though it were the burial place of giants. And that made me think just of a megalithic site, and especially with all the legends about, well, maybe not just legends of a giant people. So that struck me, linking straight back to where we came in, Avebury and the megalithic sites for the winter solstice. The notes say that he's referring to Cornwall, and he visited Dickens in 1842 to see for himself the appalling conditions of child miners. So again, about the persecuted children. And that's when the whole thing at the end of the Ghost of Christmas Present, where you see under his cloak there's a boy and a girl who like these poor orphan children. They are man's, and they cling to me appealing from fathers. This boy is ignorance, this girl is want. Beware them both and all of their degree, but most of all beware this boy. On his brow is written doom, unless the writing be erased. And that's the idea, that you can change the future by letting in light. And that's where we've come full circle, because I think good old Charlie Dickens. I know Mind Unveiled was saying, oh, there's bits in there. It's about, it could be like a Freemasonic thing, and you've got the different rites of initiation for the different ghosts that you have to go through. Yeah, there may well be that, but those passages struck such a great chord with me, relevant to our times and every time, that I think I've taken it full. He's taking it full back, or he's trying to take it back to those original winter solstice celebrations, which are all about impregnating the darkness with light. So I think that's pretty much where I'm gonna wrap it up, because I love to wrap it up with light in the darkness. And I hope, my lovely friends, I've just got water in here, but you all have an absolutely amazing Christmas, Yule, winter solstice. Right, you've told them about the book, so I've got to do it. Yeah, I am going to do a book that's going to draw together all the things, you know, that I've been doing the talks about over the year, and I guess this is a good point at the end of the year to probably be the last live stream of the year. We're going to Glastonbury next weekend for the winter solstice, which was going to be fantastic. I haven't been anywhere, an ancient site, for any solstice, winter or summer. So, like I say, it seems to be particularly important now. So,
Just get your big head up there instead of Mark's big.
Liz was. Oh, oh Christ! I got. Oh, blimey!
There's his big head.
I got his tongue almost down me. This is scary, isn't it?
Been in a completely different.
Could have been worse, yeah.
So we just want to say thank you to everybody that stuck with us from the beginning. Maybe some of you have been with us for even before the COVID.
Yeah.
But we love you all, and thank you for putting up with our nonsense and joining in the nonsense and just sticking with us, because what a year. For personal reasons, there's been illness here, there's been all sorts of nonsense going on, but we're still here, and we're still, Mark's still pulling it out the bag. He works full time, mind. He does all this research in his lunchtime on the bus when he gets home. Honest to God, I don't know how he does it. So he's going to get a book together, and there's going to be a thread that goes through.
Yeah, well,
there's a thread.
Well, as many of you have been listening to so many of the live streams, I think you'll know. I keep on again today. It was like, oh, like I mentioned in that previous live stream, it is a thread that's running through it there. So there will be, and Ego's dropped in as well.
Yeah.
He's been lurking for 30 minutes. Happy Yule, everyone, and fuck off 2025. But
we could do it. We just keep coming together, even if it's in daft little chat boxes. I mean, that was 3 hours that we didn't. Okay, we did think about child sacrifice.
Well, but, but you know, but we came back to the light.
We always wanted to make sense of the madness in a way, didn't we? That's what we wanted to do. And I don't think we've done it. I don't think we've done it.
It's an eternal battle of light and dark, but we keep going.
So next year there's going to be a book, because I'm going to force him to do it, and we're going to call it Gnomes in Cars. That was Johnny's idea.
That's the thread.
So thanks, guys. Who knows what next year will bring, because we didn't really know we were going to do this for a whole year. We started in January with the live streams, and we just carried on going.
I mean, I'm
you nutters kept coming back.
Yeah, we'll still try and do live streams. I mean, obviously, I'm gonna get the book together, but we'll keep going, and there'll always be new stuff. So we will see you all on the other side, as they say, as we come through.
Amazing, whatever this season means to you.
Cian Dumas, thank you.
That would be a rubbish Christmas card. Have a happy whatever the fuck you do.
Right. Happy Yule, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Love to you all. John Stokes, thank you. Thank you all, Jimmy Ra. Love you. Bye.
Bye, John. Bye, Jimmy. Bye, Margaret.
Bye, you all.
Mari,
Margaret, everyone that's been here. Oh, so many.
E.T.
Gnomes in cars. Christmas gnomes in cars.
Yeah. Oh, gnomes. Let's play them out.
Oh, Christ.
Let's play them out.
Why did I say that, everybody? I don't know.
I thought it was
Oh, blimey. Get me out.
everybody to get their
Get me out.
get some fun emojis ready.
Get your fun emojis. Let's have some fun emojis, everybody. I've got my Christmas hat. I don't know where it's gone. Right. Right, hurry up. Keep talking. Gnomes in cars. The Christmas version. The Christmas thing. Could be Christmas #1, everybody. It won't be because we haven't released it anywhere. But anyway, that's in spirit. Gnomes in cars. Where are you, Liz? I can't add a lot. I'm going to stick my tongue out like this. Right. Oh, some nice emojis coming in. Brilliant. Love it. Oh, yeah. Johnny Fettler's gone absolutely mental with it. Oh, brilliant. Green tea's got lots of variety there. Fabulous. Where are you, Liz? Where are you? I'm dying on my arse here. Here it comes. I can hear it. Oh.
Like this.
All right.
Gnomes in
Cars.
cars.
Gnomes.
Fox ears.
Gnomes in cars. Gnomes in cars.
Gnomes
In cars. Gnomes in cars.
Mind your business.
No, mind my business.
Mind your business.
Gnomes
Imagine the people that have just tuned in.
in cars.
Gnomes in cars.
Gnomes in cars. Gnomes in